Welcome to Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Bobby Pominville, and this is the art segment. And today I'm going to be interviewing an author. She's also a teacher and an artist, but today we'll be talking about her new book and then doing a little reading from the book. So I want to welcome Evelyn Klein, my friend, to the show again.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm very happy we could connect again, and I'm really excited to talk to you about your new book and some of the readings in there that you're going to be doing and a little bit on this show. We hope you enjoy that. First of all, tell us how you started writing books.
Well, in the very beginning, I wrote primarily for my students. And so it was mostly teaching material. Mm-hmm. And I never actually published that, though, because it was so easy to just run it off and use it. And then I would write poetry on my own time and do it for recreation and kind of hide it away. And then I got my master's degree in the teaching of English, and I studied Virginia Woolf, and I wrote my thesis on Virginia Woolf. And that allowed me to come out of the closet, and I decided it's time.
That's great.
And so I started spending all of my free time writing poetry.
That's wonderful.
And then finally I decided if I was going to do anything with it, I would have to teach less and write more or work on the publishing end. So I flipped it around. I teach part-time and I write full-time.
Right. And it does kind of work into your teaching of the different from the different books, and perhaps even teaching how to write. Do you teach those kind of classes?
Yes, I now teach adults how to write. I teach sometimes at the Loft, and I've taught at Century College. And actually, I started out at the Loft leading a poetry group for quite a number of years, and then it was time to start actually teaching there. And but once you get into publishing, that becomes very time-consuming.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason I didn't start earlier. Was it just when you have a full load of teaching, there isn't that much time left.
No,
and so
that's true.
Yeah, so then it's easier now. And so now that my new book is out, Seasons of Desire.
Mm-hmm. And is this your third book?
This is my third book.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, because I thought you were going to say that you started when you retired, kind of, but you really haven't retired. You just made more time for it.
Right. Right, and it was just kind of stepping it up a bit, because I have the kind of mind that's constantly at writing, and so it's almost a self-defense. If you put it in a book, then you can go on, and that will leave you alone,
How interesting. Well, and I'm going to hold up your new book, Seasons of Desire. What an attractive cover. And not only have you written the book, you have done the artwork.
Yes, I did the cover because I decided that I wanted to put symbolically on the cover what is in the book. And so I first tried one cover, and I decided halfway through that's not going to work, and then I came up with that. And I thought this would work much better, so that you have the psychological or the developmental aspect of life is represented by Pegasus on top there.
Right.
And then the spiritual part by the church steeples.
Right.
And then the four circles on the building represent the four elements.
Okay.
And then the four windows, you can't see all four of them, but they're kind of indicated, just like in life you don't always see everything, kind of are symbolic.
That's true, very true.
Yeah, they're symbolic of the seasons. And then you have music and you have art, and so you have a coming together of the artistic and the developmental and the spiritual.
Yes, and I always think it's so much stronger when you bring those elements together.
Yes, yes.
It's very, very
And it's actually
Interesting how that works.
yes, it's one of those discoveries that you make when you actually do write, that these three things do come together.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think, what would you tell our audience the book is about, or what does it include?
Well, the book is kind of a following your dreams and developing your talents to the ultimate point. Carl Jung calls that individuation, where you really go back to those times when you felt free to do those things that you wanted to do. But we get kind of busy with life, and we have to earn a living, and sometimes
Right.
what we want to do and what we should do and need to do isn't the same thing.
Yes. Very
And
much
so, yeah, and so then you realize after a while that if you don't make time for those other things, that can become detrimental to your outlook on life. And really, with the longer life expectancy, I think it is good to realize too that we can keep developing through the seasons. We don't have to discard our dreams because we have a daytime job, but we can follow them, you know, as a hobby or in some other way, and then maybe flip it around. Perhaps if I had known that you could make a career out of writing earlier, I would have done that earlier. So I think, you know, in the public schools, we talk about lifelong education. That kind of tells me there's a seed there that starts to recognize that just because we're adults, we don't stop developing.
You're right.
Whether we do it consciously or unconsciously. So,
And that need to create
yes.
can be very strong,
Yes.
and there can be a lot of joy, and probably a little bit of the other, when you're trying to develop that.
Well, and it's kind of a fulfillment too, because you know, you look at something, for instance, when you do visual art, it takes you quite a while of looking at it before you understand how it is composed and how you can transpose that onto a flat piece of paper
Right.
and make it look as three-dimensional as it does out there. And then once you do, it's almost as if you become that object or that person, at least for the time that you're working on the picture.
Right.
And so it is, it's a tremendous journey in learning and understanding and discovery.
It is.
Yes.
What a beautiful way to spend your time. You've gotten to this level now of expressing. And it's really, I really admire you for being able to do this.
Well, it just, you know, takes the effort. Now, my dad was an artist, and so
Right.
I had lessons from him. And of course, since he's no longer with us, I've decided, well, maybe I can just do it myself.
Yeah.
And
it's working.
it's working, yes.
And there's another picture in this book that you showed me that people in this area would definitely recognize. I know it's in the front part, isn't it? I don't know if they can see it very well, but would you tell them what this view is?
This is a view from Berkmoos Park.
Yes.
And across the St. Croix from Wisconsin into Minnesota.
Yes.
And in the foreground, I took a little license and I moved the mountains over a little bit, but I felt it was such a spiritual setting
Yes.
that it needed to be part of the picture.
Yes.
And again, in the background, you see the skyline of St. Paul, which you really can't see from that vantage
No,
point.
probably not, but I can see it.
But
yes.
I wanted to kind of give the hint of
Yes.
what lies beyond and what is here, and of course the balloons, that the hot air balloons that are so much a part of this
Yes.
area, and give it such a
We see
personality.
them so often.
Yes.
I mean, one day I was driving down Main Street and I looked up and there was a hot air balloon.
Yes.
And we do see them very often in calm weather.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have that hot air balloon festival, too.
Yes. Well, I remember when we lived in Hudson one time, there was one directly over our house one time. And they even spoke to us, and so we spoke. They were that low,
my.
right over the trees.
Well, and that could happen as they're landing in different areas. And so you put that into your book, and you've got a short little poem about it. Or does it correlate to the poem?
Well, it does, because it's the road of seasons.
Right.
We're always crossing from one area to another. And so I thought this would be a good introduction to the section on Road of Seasons.
Oh, yes.
Where I kind of introduce the whole topic and bring together some things that work for us in all seasons. And so
wonderful.
This is the Road of Seasons, where we travel sometimes in two directions and across water. And of course, water is such a symbolic force.
Yes.
And in the boats on the water, and of course we can't see what's underneath, and doesn't mean there isn't life underneath.
That's very, very deep. Interesting how you conceive that. Now, the book contains not just poetry, but also some prose.
Right.
So could you tell us about that? What is the difference between poetry and prose? If you were writing, which would be more difficult, or what do you enjoy more?
Well, it's hard to say. Each has a somewhat different purpose. I think what I like about prose is that it can be more direct and more straightforward. It lends itself well to expository writing, so when you want to explain something in common everyday language, sometimes prose is a better way to go. You could do it in poetry, but poetry tends to use figurative language and metaphor and explains the world in those terms, and that's a slightly different domain.
Yes.
You know, and it has the shorter lines. So sometimes the flow of prose works well for certain things where you want to explain what you're doing. And I feel that the combination of the prose and the poetry complements the thoughts very nicely. I think I like the idea of preceding the poetry with some kind of explanation, or that adds another dimension, so that when people read the poetry, they are in a kind of a setting and they can just take it from there. Maybe it comes from all those years of teaching when you have
probably.
to, you know, reading exercises and that sort of thing.
That's right.
But this is much more than that, of course.
Yes.
And because it has its own personality. And and don't forget, you know, in the past, prose didn't really come into the writing scene until the 17th century with newspapers and novels and that sort of thing. It used to be all poetry.
Okay.
So it's a relatively younger form of expression, if you
that's
will.
interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think is more difficult for you? Or isn't it really quite that?
No, it isn't really quite that. It is, each has a separate purpose.
Yes.
And for the purpose, you still have to put the work in. You know, you can, the nice thing about poetry is you can condense, because you can use such powerful poetic, lyrical, and language. You can use metaphor and other figures of speech, of figurative language in the shorter lines, so you can compact a lot into a poem. So the purpose of each is very different. But I think it is, just like it is fun to change from writing to drawing, it's also fun to change between the different types of writing to, you know, so they are complementary, I think. And it seems like when I do write prose, it isn't complete if I can't throw in a poem or two, whether it's mine or whether I borrow it from somebody else.
Okay, so in different ways you get your inspiration.
Yes.
And then you can work both into your books, because they do work well together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I really
Makes
am
sense.
beginning to enjoy doing this combination.
Good, good. Well, I know we're going to be reading something in a little bit, but I did want to emphasize that you're going to be featured at the Loft in
Yes.
September.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Yes, that's when the publication launch will be taking place.
Yes, and it's September 14th. I believe it's a Friday.
Yes.
At 7 p.m. And that's located where now?
It's on Washington Avenue, 1110 Washington Avenue. It's right behind the Hubert Humphrey Dome.
Right,
And
right.
yeah,
very easy to get to.
It's easy to get to. And there's a parking lot, and since it's Friday, there will be no classes in session, so the parking will be pretty much for the guests that
and that
come.
Shouldn't be too bad of
There's
a time
also
to get there.
Yeah, street parking, so there will be plenty of parking. And there will be refreshments, and I will have the pictures. The original drawings will all be framed, including the cover picture will be framed and up for display so that people can see those. And I will talk a little bit about the pictures as well as about the book.
So you'll be introducing it, and then will you be the only author there?
Yes,
that
I
night?
will be.
You would be at 7, so they have to come right away if they're going to hear you.
Yes.
And then what's the situation there? Do you just go right in the front door and you'll easily find your way, I assume?
Yes, you go up the steps.
Okay.
And there's kind of an open area there in front of the Loft offices, and this will be the social area where I will greet the people, and then and beyond that then is the auditorium. And so we will spend approximately from 7 to 8 in the auditorium, and then we'll have refreshments, wine and hors d'oeuvres, and book signing will follow.
And it's open to anyone.
And it's free admission.
All right.
So
very good.
Encourage anyone who is interested to get a glimpse of this to come. And you're not obligated to purchase a book, but if you so desire, it will be available, and I will be there.
You might want to just come in here and
yes,
and see if it piques your interest.
Yes.
I suppose I should have asked you, how much is the book?
The book is $14.95, so it's quite
and
reasonable.
It's very easily to.
Yeah, and I think it would make a lovely present, because it's really not an age-specific book. It is for anyone who would like to get a little encouragement for following their dreams and how to go about doing that. And
that's very, very nice subject. I think a lot of us are doing that still.
Oh, absolutely.
Pursuing that,
yes,
and finding what works and what doesn't work and all. And did you want to say anything else about the book before we do that special reading?
Well, I think it's probably a good idea when you read the book that you read it in sequence. Obviously, you can read the poems randomly, but I think you will get more out of it if you read it in sequence, because it is, after all, a way of looking at the seasons of life. But the seasons are not just, youth and middle age and whatever else, but it's kind of a repetition throughout our lives. These seasons keep repeating, especially when we are involved in new things and we keep on growing. And just like our bodies keep renewing themselves, so that our ability to change our lives or enrich our lives is always there, and we can discard or add and keep on growing.
Wow, that's an interesting interpretation. And
Well,
it is true.
Yes.
You're going through different phases in your life. And there are times when you probably do go back somewhat.
Yes.
Take a look back.
Right, as long as you don't kind of, hang out there too long.
Yeah.
Because that's not
You do need to move forward.
You need to move forward. The past is good for knowing, okay, that was then, and that's how I did it, but now how am I going to do it?
Right.
And so...
That's very, very interesting the way you describe that. And I think it's interesting to me to think about those different phases. So, good idea for a book, Evelyn.
Yeah, so look for them in there, and because I do delineate them for adults, because really as adults nobody has told us that this is going on and that we can keep on growing like that. And I thought, what a shame, you know.
That's exactly right. Well, would you like to introduce the reading?
Well, I thought we could do selected parts of a longer poem.
Okay.
Entitled Song of America.
Yes.
And since we're quickly moving towards September, the poem was actually written in memory of 9/11. But as I was saying earlier, it isn't sometimes until we lose something that is very precious to us, or we feel that something precious to us has been injured, that we realize just how precious it was. And so that's what inspired the poem. And so the poem, because I love to work with music, not just with visual art, but also with music. When I first thought of it, it came to me partly in song. And so I thought, why not write it down, because it just fits what I want to say.
I think that's perfect, especially with my love of music and how well it correlates with this poetry.
Yes.
So, and then I'm very pleased that we're going to be doing this in September so we can remember 9/11.
Yes.
That's very nice, Evelyn.
And I feel very fortunate to have you here to help me out with that, because...
Well, I'm very happy to help you out, and I'll do my best.
Because your talents are on the musical end.
Yes. So we're going to go ahead then with the reading of the poem, and you'll hear some music along with it, and I hope it'll be a memorable experience for all of you. And it's called Song of America. Oh, say, can you see? This land is my land,
where I gave my children life in the home of untold possibilities.
This land is your land.
Refuge in the storm of global conflict and intolerance.
From sea to shining sea,
they came looking for a new life, for land, adventures, and riches, and found home. They built roads to the future, bridges to connect the past, leaving landmarks for generations to trace.
Let freedom ring
from Atlantic to Pacific, borders north and south, in all other parts that constitute the whole.
And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave
over the founding dream, unfolding, expanding, carried forward in eternal colors.
O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave,
to have and to hold each day like the first.
I'm proud to be an American. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Bobby. I
Oh.
think we make a good team.
I think we make a very good team, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the loft and doing that. And, you know, just being a part of that now was very moving. So thank you for your wonderful vision for writing this and putting the music to it, because for me, everything is so meaningful when you do music. And I think the two just fit together so perfectly.
They do. They do.
So, and you wanted to say one more thing.
Yes. Since this is a book about following your dream, just like the dream of America, I'd like to share a poem that I wrote for my father. What my father told me: life is a canvas, and you fill it with whatever you like. Choose the colors and the hues, the people and scenes. Your picture can be anything you want. You can create the world in which you live.
That's very lovely. Well, I hope our audience has enjoyed this today, and I think it's a wonderful tribute to America and the losses of 9/11. And I know we'll be hearing a lot about that, but I think Evelyn has done an excellent job bringing that back to me a little bit and making it more meaningful for me. So I thank you, Evelyn, for coming on the show again. I hope you enjoyed this show today, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Bobby. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Evelyn. You got through it. I knew you were getting a little emotional.